Welcome to this session on the pragmatics of flipping. I'm Mary Litch, Director of Academic Technology at Chapman.
And I'm Kirk Key, Assistant Professor of Communication Studies here at Chapman.
So, Kirk, tell me a little about yourself.
Okay, this is my fourth year at Chapman. I joined Chapman in fall of 2010, and I have several years of experience experimenting with technologies in the classroom and innovations and innovative methods of teaching in the classroom. When I was a graduate student working on my PhD at the University of Texas at Austin, I incorporated team-based learning in my teaching, and I also experimented with Second Life, which was a new platform back then in 2008. 2007, 2008-ish in my classes as well. And since I came to Chapman, I started playing with new ideas as well, and I have implemented WordPress in my teaching. And about a year ago, I started incorporating flipping in my classes as well.
Okay. Well, in this session, we're going to talk about some of the practical issues that instructors will want to think about before they use a teaching innovation, flipping or otherwise. So the first question, Kirk, it's sort of common wisdom that today's young people are very tech savvy, very comfortable with technology, in particular online technology. Has that been your experience here at Chapman?
That's a good question. My response to that question is twofold. I think I would agree in general that if we compare our students with us, I would say that they are more comfortable with technologies in general and web-based technologies in particular. However, I think that comfort may be the result of their conditioning, the conditioning of this generation as well, because our students today pretty much grew up with the internet. So they were exposed to the internet and web-based technologies at such a young age that their exposure helped them to create a sense of comfort. On the other hand, I also think that there are always going to be some students who are not comfortable with technologies, and I think that students are generally comfortable with the cell phones, with the apps on the cell phones, and with Facebook and Twitter and some of the social media platforms that I use on a daily basis. So based on my experience, I would say when I introduced Second Life to my students at UT Austin a few years back, and also WordPress to my students here at Chapman a couple of years back, I noticed that in fact quite a few students struggle with these technologies, and I think a part of it is that at the time of the introduction, they were actually not aware of Second Life and WordPress, and many of them have no experience with these platforms. And even though we assume that they are very comfortable with technologies, but it still took them a while to get on board and get comfortable with the platform, and before they could become proficient with the technologies in the teaching and learning context.
Yeah, I mean, I've also seen that in my role as academic technology director, and also in my role as an instructor here, that sometimes I'll be trying to introduce a technology, and I'm surprised that I get a percentage of the students who really struggle with the platform that I'm using.
Definitely.
Well, another issue related to kind of student openness for innovations involve their willingness to kind of have the traditional model upset, either in terms of a new type of assignment or a restructuring of the class time. Have you found openness on the part of students in that regard?
That's another great question. If I can draw from my research, my personal research, I conduct research in the area of adoption and diffusion of innovations in social systems, especially in organization and work contexts. If I can draw from that line of research, research has consistently shown that there are about 5 groups of adopters. You have the first 2.5% of any population uh, who will pretty much jump on board and get their hands on any new technologies as soon as they come out. And these are the hardcore people. And
only 2.5%.
2.5%.
Wow.
It's the niche group that we refer to as innovators. And this group is followed by the next 13.5% that we refer to as early adopters. And these early adopters are technologically savvy, but they are not hardcore in the sense that they are not going to camp out in front of a computer store and be the first person to buy a tech toy the next morning. But they're still very savvy in terms of their interest and their comfort level with technology. Then the third group is what we refer to as the early majority. They make up about 34% of the population, and these are the people who watch the innovators and the early adopters, and they recognize that, well, this technology is here to stay, and it's better for me to get on board. And then you have the next 34% that we refer to as the late majority, and they are the people who will respond to peer pressure, and so they tend to wait and watch, and they tend to want to resist technologies, but when they feel like they have to because of peer pressure, they will. And finally, you have the last 16% that we refer to as the laggards.
The laggards.
The laggards, and these are the people who will consistently resist any innovations, any new technologies that you introduce to them. So I would say if we can apply this research and this general breakdown of the 5 adopter categories to the instructional setting to our classroom. So in a group of about 10 students, I generally get about 1 to 2 students who will always resist the technologies I introduce to them, and they are the 16% of the laggards. And then I always get about 1 or 2% who are either the innovators, the hardcore tech nerds, and also the early adopters who are tech savvy. So that's about 1 to 2 students in a group of 10. And then you have the rest of the 6 to 8 students who will fall anywhere between the 2 extremes. So I would say that there are always going to be some students who are going to be enthusiastic and excited about any innovations that introduce to them. And there will always going to be some students who will resist. And in the middle, there will be students who would take a little bit of effort from the instructor's end to kind of bring them on board.
Now, among those students in the laggard group, are there any properties or anything about those students or those individuals that will help you understand why they are laggards?
Sure. I think in general, laggards hold a more traditional and conservative standpoint in life, and so they're just naturally cautious about technologies. They're more skeptical and suspicious of technology, so that's one thing. Second is that from a social network perspective, they are usually further removed from the opinion leaders and the early adopters in their peer groups. So they tend to hang out with a smaller group of peers, and they're more isolated in the sense that it will take a few more steps before they are socially connected to an early adopter or an opinion leader who is in favor of the technologies. And also, laggards tend to be suspicious of the people who promote technologies in the social system as well. So, and because of that tendency, they develop this justification. They always have a reason, a well-justified rationale for why they resist technologies, and they always can articulate that very well, and their logic appears very rational to themselves. So those are some of the characteristics of laggards, and that's usually how you can spot them from some of the predisposition, from the way they articulate and defend themselves in the positions, and also from the way, if you look at the social networks and social connections of students among their peers, and then you will see that they are further removed from the people who are championing technologies, or who are, in general, more enthusiastic about technologies in the peer group.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like then laggardness or laggerhood is pretty deeply entrenched
Yes.
in the individual. So what sort of strategies would you as an instructor have to try and kind of bring them in?
Okay. Well, that's another great question. From a practical standpoint, and not from a social network perspective, what I've done is I will constantly I will articulate and constantly re-articulate my rationale for implementing a new technology in the classroom. I will try to promote and justify why this is good for them. And I usually try to use feature-based language. I would try to make the argument that this is good for you in the future, for your future career and your future life, if we learn this now. I also try to attend to the students who have a tendency to resist any innovations in the classroom by seeking their input. So throughout the semester, I'll do several rounds of student feedback, and I will invite them to email the responses to me, and I will particularly take time to attend to students who are struggling with the idea and resisting the innovation. And I will take time to acknowledge their feedback. I will explain to them how I'm going to incorporate their suggestions, even though I'm not going to throw the whole innovation out. So I think that students appreciate that, as long as they feel that I'm introducing the technology to them with a good intention, and then their voice is also heard in the process of implementation. I think that tend to make them feel okay about the innovation. And then from a social networks perspective, what we can do is to informally identify the opinion leaders in the class, or identify the students who are more enthusiastic about the idea. And when we break students into small groups to work on projects, kind of spread those opinion leaders out, and then have at least one opinion leader in each group. So mix the laggards with the opinion leaders, and hopefully influence the opinion leaders, and have the opinion leaders influence their peers in their respective groups. So that is a strategy from research for diffusion network analysis.
Well, we've talked about students who are laggards in the sense of being uncomfortable or unwilling to use new technologies, uncomfortable or unwilling to have teaching innovations, whether they involve technology or not. But what about the student, and I've actually encountered this in some of my classes, when I try and bring active learning into the classroom, so we're no longer having the model where the instructor lectures to the students, I'll get a handful of students who feel like, well, I'm not getting my money's worth. I'm paying, or in the case of Chapman, my parents are paying large amounts of money for me to not hear what Joe next to me happens to think, but to get information from the instructor, and here the instructor is breaking me up into a group with some other people, and we're exchanging views. I want my money's worth. What do you say to that sort of student, or have you not encountered that kind of student?
I definitely have encountered students who hold that view, and I think that's the way I interpret that is that that's just the tendency of laggards in our social system, and as we previously discussed, they tend to hold a traditional and conservative worldview. They're more cautious, so they're not comfortable with change, and so because of that inherent traditional value that they embrace, this is going to be a natural reaction. When we try flipping direct instruction outside of the classroom. And I also think that this perception can be particularly prominent here at Chapman because we as faculty have also defined personalized education for our students as face-to-face and direct instruction in the classroom. I do not disagree that being face-to-face and giving direct instruction is a key manifestation of personalized education, but I also think that flipping has a lot of potential for us to explore other possibilities of manifesting personalized education when direct instruction is moved outside of the classroom, especially prior to our class meeting with our students. And I think another part, another answer to your question is that's when we as professors have to work more strategically, systematically, and put in a little bit more hard work into planning what goes on in the classroom when we move direct instruction out of the classroom. If we are able to create enough activities, enough experience for the students that they feel like, wow, I'm actually learning something here. I think that they will slowly come to realize that flipping can be academically substantial as well. So one thing that I've done in my classes is towards the end of the meeting, so the last 5 to 10 minutes, I will then stop and ask students, so tell me what you learned today. And I'll just get students to repeat back to me or paraphrase in their own way, recall based on the 75 minutes they have with me. I teach on Tuesday and Thursday, that's why 75 minutes. And then they will then repeat back to me and say, oh, I learned this, I learned that. So, and sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised to hear things in their own words about what they just learned, because there are things that I did not think would be a key points out of that day's meeting in the classroom, but I usually hear some good feedback. So I think that's another way of helping students kind of see the values of what they gain out of a non-traditional approach to teaching and learning.
And that's a really good approach to take, because it's sort of respecting the students, even the laggards, that presenting reasons and getting them to kind of come to their own conclusions. I'm actually learning more using this method than I am in direct instruction. Based on our earlier conversation, I know that sometimes when an instructor uses or implements an innovation, there's going to be that small percentage of laggards who are still back there and are still unhappy that their apple cart has been upset. Now, one of the things that the Institute for Excellence in Teaching is going to do to help kind of defray some of the downside of that, and this fits in with the kind of respecting students, presenting a teaching innovation in the framework. We know we're experimenting. We, the instructor and the students, we're all sort of in this boat together, and I want to make sure I get your feedback once we've done the innovation. So the Institute for Excellence in Teaching is going to be offering anonymous surveys to students, not so much about the class or about the instructor, but about the innovation itself, so that students once again feel, if not empowered, at least sort of respected, that this is this is really about what I'm getting out of it.
Okay.
Do you think that approach might help, again, for those few laggards that you haven't been able to convince using some of your kind of forward methods?
I think that's a great idea. I think definitely having IET involved in administering a survey would definitely add credibility to the instructor's attempt to introduce an innovation, and it will also help students feel like their opinions are being regarded seriously from an institutional standpoint. If I can make some suggestions. I think that in addition to measuring student satisfaction and their own perceived level of learning, if we can also consider having students self-identify their adopter category in the same survey, so that we can also maybe analyze systematically to see if students' reaction to the innovation may be some predictable, maybe a predictable outcome of their general tendency towards technologies, regardless of how effective the faculty member may be maybe introducing the technology in the classroom.
And are students
Yeah.
usually good at self-reporting? Do they recognize themselves as an early adopter versus a laggard? It's hard to imagine a student checking the box that says, yes, I'm a laggard.
I think it really depends on how we phrase the question in the survey. So I think if we can phrase the survey in a way that we're not labeling them or suggesting positive or negative connotations associated with different category, different adopter groups, but we can define them in a way that make them help them reflect upon their own personal tendencies towards technologies. I think we can at least get some ideas from that survey result, because otherwise we're assuming that students have the same degree of innovativeness or the same degree of comfort and also interest in technologies. And the other thing that I think might be interesting, and I don't know if this is a part of other questions that you have, is that I think another question that we can consider incorporating in the survey is a question on how much time students work outside of the classroom, maybe full-time or part-time, and also how
You
much
mean work on coursework or work?
work like for
Okay.
money, for at a company, or maybe for their internship experience. And also I think it would be useful to also measure the amount of time they spend in getting involved in on-campus and off-campus organizations, because recently I attended a teaching workshop by my dear colleague, Dr. Jennifer Wadak. I think the workshop was just last month. It was on November 14th, 2013. And I was very intrigued by the statistics that she reported. I believe she reported that in 2011, 70% of the students worked they have a job of some sort. So 71%, that's a huge number. And out of that 71%, 1 out of 5 actually worked more than 35 hours a week.
Wow.
And
that's Chapman undergraduates?
No, I think that the statistic that she cited was a national statistic.
Okay.
So it's a national trend, not just at Chapman, but I also, based on my personal observation, I think that may be true. A lot of my students actually work now, which was certainly not the case when I went to college. And the other thing that she shared was this generation of students recognize that employers are more interested in well-rounded individuals. So employers today are not only looking for people with professional interests, but with social interests as well. So they try to get involved in on-campus and off-campus organizations, and they're very engaged. So, and on top of working, getting involved on campus and off campus, and we also expect them to take their education seriously. A
lot of instructors get the idea that the student is all of the time that they're not in the classroom, they have available to be studying for a next class session. And you're then shocked when they come and they haven't done the reading and they seem unprepared.
Exactly. So I think Jennifer's message, one of her messages during her teaching workshop was, we're dealing with a generation of students who are very, very, very busy. Busier than we anticipated. So what we get is, after a full day of classes, working and volunteering and being engaged, students are now, very tired and exhausted. So I think that plays a part in their ability to adopt a new technology in the classroom as well. So whenever when we ask them to have to modify what they're used to and adapt to our new way of teaching and learning, they may not have the bandwidth to follow the way we have planned for them. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think back to the idea of the survey, I think the survey is a great idea, but I think that it may be useful to include additional questions that also collect data on their self-identified adopter group, and also the time they spend working professionally, and also the time they spend being involved in community organizations.
That's an excellent suggestion. I'll have Joel add those to the survey.
Thank you.
So my last question. So you're an assistant professor on tenure track.
Yes.
And as director of academic technology, I'm often not so much on tiptoes, but I'm aware of a faculty member's status when I'm sort of suggesting that they use an innovation in their teaching, understanding that sometimes innovations, even if it results in improved learning, can have sort of a downside on the end of semester evaluations.
Yes.
Which do obviously play a role in the tenure and promotion process here. So do you have any special advice for other faculty who are on tenure track who are thinking of trying this flipping thing?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, I am on tenure track, so I have given some thought to this question. I started thinking about this question when I was a graduate student, experimenting with Second Life, which was not an easy platform to implement.
It's not. I gave up on it after I couldn't get it to stop crashing.
So I started thinking about that question when I was a graduate student, and I got some good advice from my mentor in graduate school as well. But overall, I would say this: the first thing, talk to your department chair or associate dean or dean before you attempt anything too innovative, because I think it's important to keep them in the loop, let them know that's what you're doing. Make sure that you have this support before you jump into the pool. So I think that's the first piece of advice. Second, it is probably better to try something new earlier when you're on tenure track than later.
Oh.
Yes, because if you try something new and it doesn't work out, what we're afraid of as faculty on tenure track is your teaching evaluation may go down. But if you try
that upward
trajectory, exactly. So if you experiment with something new earlier with your during your career on tenure track, and it doesn't work out, and it lowers your teaching eval, don't freak out. You can always return to traditional teaching and learning methods, and then you will be able to show an upward trajectory of your teaching eval. And I think that don't do that during your last 2 years. So I think that's the other thing. Third is constantly seek your students' input. What I've found is even though students may struggle with the technology in the classroom, as long as they feel like their voices are heard and their feelings are attended to, their frustrations are understood by the professor, I think they tend to be understanding and less critical when we get to the point of doing teaching evaluation. So I think that usually when they feel like they have an outlet to voice their opinion and you're taking them seriously, when they get to the teaching eval, they may feel like, oh, my professor already knows. I don't have to reiterate this in the teaching eval, or I appreciate his or her response, to my struggle, and so I'm not going to give my professor a 1 throughout the teaching eval. So I think that's very important to implement. Invite students to come to your office to discuss that, or do anonymous survey online, or do email surveys so you can respond to them individually and engage with them. And another thing is strategically look for opportunities with teaching innovations that may add a CV line. So this sounds a little strategic now in retrospect, but in 2001, fall of 2001, I participated in the I applied for and was selected as 1 out of 5 faculty who participated in the Blended Course Initiative, sponsored by Mary, your office, and also the Chancellor's office.
Actually, the money came from the Chancellor's office. So.
But the support and all that came from your office. During that experience, I implemented WordPress in my teaching in one of my classes here at Chapman. And I knew I was taking a risk. And I know that a few students, the 16% of the laggards of my class that semester, struggled and resisted the idea of WordPress. They did comment in the teaching eval, and some expressed still their slight discontent. But it was definitely not negative in the sense that they were upset or something. They just commented in a very objective way that it was the first time they experienced WordPress and how it could be done differently. But I knew that it was not simply a risk, but it was a risk worth taking because I have another item to add on my CV and for my e-portfolio for tenure promotion. And I think that an opportunity like this is worth taking the risk for it, because when upper administration sees that a junior faculty member is willing to take on something that is systematic, is supported by your office and the Chancellor's office, it also shows that the faculty member is interested in taking some risk and taking teaching seriously and wanting to be innovative in one's teaching. So I think that always communicates a good message to upper administration in the context of tenure and promotion. And with your idea of having IET administering a survey apart from the digital teaching eval, I think we will be able to help faculty members who are interested in flipping or taking on additional innovations in the future to feel like they have now more support, institutional support in taking on an experiment.
And certainly the Chancellor has said on numerous occasions that he's interested in seeing faculty not just innovate, but innovate in ways that involve using technology, maybe more so than they are now. So, well then, on that happy note, we will say goodbye to the viewer audience, and thank you very much, Professor Key.
Thank you. So, goodbye.
Goodbye.